The word faith needs to be recontextualized for this generation.
Hebrews 11 still speaks to believers today.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for choosing to view our program today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am from Andrews University, which is in Michigan, and I'm the moderator of today's show. I'd like you now to meet our panelists for the day.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I am the Senior Strategist for Missional Ministries, and I serve 2,700 churches in the state of Texas. I'm a Baptist minister.
Hi, my name is Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel of Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm Professor of Ethics and History at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Thank you very much, panelists. And now to our topic of the day. One of the best-known passages of Christian scripture is Hebrews chapter 11, a passage that recounts Old Testament men and women of faith who acted out of conviction of God's promises of what was to come. The passage begins with Hebrews 11:1 that defines faith as, quote, confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see, end of quote. It concludes in Hebrews 12:1 that calls for current action by believers who have even more reason to persevere in faith because of Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. According to a recent Gallup poll, in the United States, church attendance has dropped. Commitment to organized religion is less, and many of those that do not believe in God do not see that belief as relevant or see God as actively engaging or intervening in their lives. With this background, some may see Hebrews 11 as an interesting reflection on biblical times and faith, but not a passage with any relevance to today. Faith in that current context may be attached to esoteric belief, but not to the importance of action that was part of the lives of those held up as ideals of faith in Hebrews 11. So in this context, the panelists today are asked to consider at least the following questions. Firstly, how important is faith to the life of an individual believer or to the heart of a faith community? Secondly, how would you define faith for 2022? And finally, does faith in the United States look different to faith in other nations that are less secularized? I'll turn to those that began our conversation for opening comments.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Faith remains central to the life of the individual believer. And faith also remains very important to the life of the faith community. I mean, that's why we call them faith communities, because they believe in something. Generally, I mean, and generically, there's a belief in God. For those of us who are Christians, specifically a belief in Jesus Christ as well. And I love Hebrews 11. It's a powerful example and definition of what faith is. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, which I think really captures the essence of what it is. I think it's relevant. I think what we need to do, though, to help it be understood is that we need to at least contextualize it and give people a deeper understanding of the various ways that the word faith is used. For example, in the Lutheran tradition, we talk about faith that's received. In other words, faith is something that simply receives the gifts of God. For the Christian, it's a reception of Jesus Christ and the forgiveness of sins, restoration of a relationship with God. It's not something really that we do, it's something that we receive, and in receiving it, it actually creates the very faith that receives it. And so it's a passive faith. And that's really the initiation of the Christian life, is that reception. I mean, baptism is a symbol of that. A child in the Lutheran tradition just receives the grace of God, often brought by parents, but didn't choose to do it. It's just a gift. That enters you into the community, which then now you are a part of, and in that community you begin to grow in faith. That is, it's not a passive faith anymore, but it becomes something that you begin to explore, to try to understand, to try to grow into, and then to shape your moral life in accordance with also the moral precepts that we teach in Christianity. And so faith, again, passive, but it's also active. And I mean, Hebrews 11 is a classic list of people who are very active, even to the point of death, right? Because of the deep convictions that people have. And we still honor people like that today. I mean, I was thinking, in the Lutheran tradition, we have Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed in his opposition to the Nazis in Germany, to Hitler. We think of Mother Teresa, who did tremendous acts of love as an expression of her faith. But I think if you ever read people like Bonhoeffer or Teresa, just to make an example, the one thing you realize as you read them is that they're people who are full of doubt. And this is where I think things are missing, is that we do not, in our communities, give people space to question, to doubt, to struggle, because really it's the flip side of the coin, doubting and faith. Because it's evidence of things not seen. It isn't like you can concretely hold it in your hand and say, I absolutely know this is. Of course, I guess if we talked to Descartes, there would be lots of doubt anyway. But my point here is just that I think that what needs to be recontextualized is to give people the permission to doubt and to give them tools to address that and how they can grow in their faith even with doubt being present.
Dr. Trovell, thank you so much for those comments. Good being with everybody this morning. Hebrews 11, as Brother Carl mentioned, is, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating passages in all of the Bible, and it speaks to faith. And my statement was Hebrews 11 still speaks to believers today. I'm a firm believer of that. My approach to Scripture obviously is, when we are studying passages in the Old and the New Testament, we attempt to bring the there and then to the here and now. And when we interpret it, we exegete the passage, we read it, we try to apply the Scriptures to the lives of the believers today. And I think Hebrews 11 certainly does that. The definition, of course, as Brother Carl mentioned, is, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Whenever I'm explaining the evidence piece, because, a lot of times I've met a lot of folks who say, well, you can't touch faith, you can't grab it. How do you describe it? And I try to describe faith, the definition, from the definition in Hebrews 11, and zooming and zeroing in on the whole evidence piece. Yeah, one example that I like to mention is that a few weeks ago, I was going to make a peach cobbler for my granddaughter's birthday. I told my daughter and everyone at home I was going to make a peach cobbler. And what I did is I had the canned peaches out on the counter. I had the nutmeg, the sugar, the brown sugar, the pie crust out. And because I said it, I told everyone that I would make the peach cobbler. That was my word. And everyone took my word, and the peach cobbler obviously was made that evening. So that was the evidence of the things hoped for. And similarly, when God speaks, we take His word, even though we may not have it in fruition. We see evidence all around us of His word, and when God speaks, we act, and that's faith. Hebrews 11 also the amazing list of individuals in Hebrews 11 is just astonishing. We refer to this, many folks will say it's the hall of faith. And, you think about people like Abel. Abel is mentioned in there. He took God's word, and it's implicit that the Lord wanted a blood sacrifice, and his sacrifice was better. He acted on it. Enoch walked with God. In a context that was counter to God. That took a tremendous amount of faith. Noah was a person of faith, as is outlined in Hebrews 11, and who built an ark when, that takes a great amount of faith. And I think the application of all of these things that we see is that we need to trust God, even when we can't see things coming in fruition. If God said it, we believe it. And there used to be a phrase in years past where people say, if God said it, that settles it. But I think if God says it, that settles it whether I believe it or not. So I think it's very important. You have Isaac, Jacob, Joseph mentioned in the Hall of Faith there in Hebrews 11, and it's very applicable to our lives today. But I think, and also very important is that in that same context, it talks about that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So I think that is something that is very important as well, that we have to have faith to please God, because it's pleasing to God when we trust Him.
Thank you very much. Over to the rest of our panelists.
So I think this is a fascinating thought. I have a couple of things I'd like to share. So one is when we talk about faith, and the obstacles to faith, especially as we see it in sort of the broader society, is what is the God in which we are asking people to have faith? And I think that sometimes some of the obstacles that I see with people in my tradition is that the model of God that is presented to them is not a model that they can embrace. So when I talk to 16-year-olds, and I ask them about their belief in God, they will often express more concrete doubts than Mother Teresa. But what they're essentially telling me is that idea of God as a big, bald, bearded fuzzy in the sky that deals out, punishment cards on the basis of how many times you light Shabbat candles, they don't buy into that model of God. And so part of what I try to do is to say, well, good, neither do I. But let's talk about what God can be that we could embrace. And those conversations tend to be incredibly fruitful, but I'm not sure that most people ever get beyond the, well, I don't believe in the fundamentalist vision of a personal God. But when you're able to present other models, that becomes a portal of entry to the creation of a meaningful faith. The second thing is that we imagine that faith is going to be something that comes purely from grace. And, when you think about how folks raise their children or how they take care of themselves, they work very hard to make sure that their bodies are healthy and strong, and that they develop whatever capacities and talents those bodies might have, whether it's to play athletics or to play a musical instrument or to produce art. We try to help ourselves grow our minds. We make sure our kids do as well as they possibly can in school. We're hopefully all trying also to grow our own intellectual curiosities by reading or by learning new things. And then you say to people, well, what are you doing to grow your moral core? What are you doing to grow your spiritual sensibilities? And you get crickets. Because I think people just assume that those capacities are going to just evolve through grace. And they don't realize that you have to be just as deliberate in growing your awareness of this spiritual realm that you don't see as you have to be in all the other developments of your humanity. There is a blessing that Jews say during the weekday service 3 times a day that begins with this Hebrew phrase, Ata chonen la'adam da'at. You grace humanity with the power of awareness. And the thing that I think happens so often to people is there is so much evidence that people don't see. the nutmeg and the brown sugar and all of, I'm so hungry, Tony. They're all there. They're all there, but we walk oblivious. It's as if we walked through the kitchen and we didn't even see the pie crust. And I think that the more that we can cultivate the practice within ourselves to be aware of the magnificence of all that can't be seen, we may have better vision.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, all of you, for the input that you've given so far. I find it fascinating and found the distinctions between passive and active faith to be helpful. Your comments about how Jewish young people, I would say Christian young people as well, have these kinds of fears and concerns and lack of faith in the kind of God that keeps being put up there by some people. But, you know, when I look at Hebrews 11, the first thing that strikes me is I stand on the shoulders of an awful lot of wonderful people. They're from the Hebrew Bible. I have a lot in common with Jews precisely because of this long list of Israelites, people who followed God and who trusted God's promise to them, or there's God's call to them, or God's warning to them in each case. Now, you know, in a secular society, we don't think much about faith, or if we do, it's often as a noun, not a verb. Faith is something that it's a declaration of what we believe about certain kinds of things. It's not simply a verb. But the fact is, we probably, every one of us, every morning, we get up, we may turn on a light. We have faith that there's going to be electricity that will make that light work, and there's going to be a generator behind that, and there's going to be a company behind that, and so forth. That's faith, trusting something I cannot see, but I know it's going to be there. Same thing with starting a car. You turn the key, and it starts. And I would say that we often, I guess I would say faith is very much like trust. If it's not, it might be the same thing, in fact. So when I made my marriage vows to my wife 53 years ago, I made promises to her. She had faith in me, I had faith in her, that she would keep those promises and that I would keep those promises. We express faith all the time. We just don't realize that when we do. I would say, for me as a Christian, my faith in God comes from the fact that I know God and God knows me. Now, that's not easy for a lot of people to swallow, but I have to say, when God came to me and said, I want you to do this, it scared the dickens out of me. It scared me. But I agreed to do it because I trusted the God who called me to do that. And it absolutely transformed my life. I don't know how to make it any more clear except to say God is alive and God is worth trusting, and God has made lots of promises, and God has said great things about the fact, I love you.
At the beginning, we talked about the falling belief. Why do you think that's happening? Why are we seeing this greater challenge?
That's one reason why I mentioned the doubt, because I was reading, some sociological analysis surveys, and one of them said is that people don't feel that they have the capacity to be wrong, to make wrong decisions, or to doubt certain things that their faith community is saying that they need to believe. And the fact that we don't give people that capacity to have that space undermines, and people pull away from that. And I mean, there's probably a variety of reasons, but that's one reason why I specifically mentioned the importance of affirming people's doubts as they struggle through to believe. I think one other piece for me is this, I hate this word blind faith. Yeah. That's so anti-biblical that somehow there's not evidence present for you to trust in God's presence. It's never blind, right? It may be hidden in some ways and fuzzy, but not blind.
Right, I think we're going to be moving in a moment towards our break. I I think Hebrews 11 to me is fascinating because it connects very much towards literature, which I'm going to talk about maybe if I have time at the end of the summation. So that's just a point to keep in our minds as we move forward. Let's take a break in the meantime.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back. And now we're going to hear our summation comments.
Thank you. I think this is a great topic of faith. I love, again, Hebrews 11. I personally identify with a lot of these folks, and when we take the there and then and apply it to the here and now, I mean, preaching to many times to folks that don't want to hear, you still have to preach. Stepping out on faith, perhaps going someplace where the Lord has called you, as he did with Abraham. He called Abraham to a place, and Abraham didn't know where he was going, how, what was waiting for him, but Abraham went. And I think that is a great testimony of Abraham's faith. And I like how Hebrews 11 is outlined as well, because we see a lot of the phrase by faith, by faith, by faith. And then, of course, we have the as one person called it, a curveball thrown when they talk about without faith. And then, of course, in verse 39 there, it talks about that all of these folks gained approval through their faith. So it's, by faith, without faith, and through your faith. And I think I would encourage everyone to read Hebrews 11, ask the Lord to help you apply that to your life, and just look at these folks as a source of encouragement, because we all have challenges, as Carl mentioned earlier. We have doubts, we have struggles, and a person who struggles doesn't mean that you don't have faith. Faith is to keep trusting in God in the midst of the struggles and the challenges.
Yeah, jumping off of that, I mean, I think it's the mustard seed, right? It's having it's even the smallest amount of faith, right, has a powerful benefits. So because I think sometimes people think they have to have all this great faith, and it's like, no, it's just the smallest mustard seed, and you can move mountains. Luther, in his discussion of the first commandment in the Large Catechism, says that actually everyone has faith, that there's not a person who doesn't have faith. The question is what do you have faith in, or who do you have faith in? And his direction is to point us toward God. But all of us find our identity, security, and meaning in something, whether it's our portfolio, or whether it's our career, or our family. And Luther just says, we were created for God, and this is our ultimate identity, security, meaning all other blessings fall from that. But let's not confuse those things that give us such identity that they would become idolatrous. And Dan, actually, this goes back to a little bit about what you were saying. I think one of the things that we oftentimes make into idols are these bizarre conceptions of who God is that I wouldn't want to believe in that either. So, I mean, we can even just invent these things as well. And so, again, I guess the first commandment is just getting us back to trust in trusting God.
One of the things that the moderator read early on was the fact that the Gallup poll suggests that people who are leaving organized religion may lack faith. I'm not convinced that that's the case. I think there are an awful lot of people out there that are searching, that are looking, and that is in itself a faith act. I know there's something out there. I know there's somebody out there that can speak to me. I just have to find that. And I think organized religion often helps people. And sometimes private spiritual quests can be useful and helpful. Not always, because I think we're intended to be in community, for one thing. It's not simply an individual act. It's something that we do in community. And faith communities do provide help in that regard. I think, we've heard a lot about faith in the past few months, especially over this COVID issue. I have faith in science. That's where my faith is. I trust them to give me the responses and the answers that I need to have in order to avoid getting COVID. Well, that's another place where we can put faith. But who stands behind that science? What are we looking for? Where is it that we're willing to trust? I guess as a Christian, one more time I will say, God is a person, and He calls for, or she, the triune God, calls for a relationship, and relationships are built on faith.
So, as someone who's not a Christian, I was grateful for this program because it pushed me to read something in Christian scripture that had so many resonances to me. But it did kind of remind me a little bit of a famous Hasidic parable where Rabbi Baruch Mezbeh's grandson comes running and he says, all upset, and he says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "We were playing hide and seek, and I hid so well that they stopped looking for me and they left me, and that's not fair." And Rabbi Baruch says, "God too, Yechiel. God too is hiding, and we're not even looking anymore." So I think that there, like any covenant, right? It's a two-way street. One can't just assume that faith will form without engaging in some measure of seeking. And at the same time, I think God is probably more apparent than we often give credit for, and so we don't even engage the search. I'm reminded that the Hebrew word Yisrael, Israel, means one who wrestles with God. It takes two to tango. And I think that part of what you see in the lack of faith that you see, not just in American society is far more religious than most secular societies, is because people aren't engaging the search.
Thank you very much. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant, Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American rights to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.